platform, not conference, convergence platform for change and transformation. We have two panelists here. I apologize for Justina, who couldn't make it. She's out of the country. But I have Kelvin Tata and Ruth Bomba. They're both very key persons in the process about which we are about to introduce. On the 7th of October this year, the church has made a very important statement, which has become the Sabbath call or the clarion call. And the process about which we are here tonight is partly a response to that call, even though in the weeks running up to that date, there have been a number of processes on the part of civil society, the many of which have been the Citizens' Manifesto, the National Convention, which many of us here in this room attended. And so what we're having now is a kind of convergence on the part of those of us who have been very concerned for the need for an inclusive dialogue to ensure that the kind of binary process of the past, going back to Lancaster House Agreement, we put behind by ensuring that civic society becomes an important constituent part of any process in terms of both the dialogue process, let's say, and the outcome of that dialogue. So it's one of the, probably the first, I would say, in the history of recent politics, where civic society has come up and demanded to be counted. So shortly, Kenneth Mtasa will outline the process that we're about and that's about which we've been discussing this morning. And Ruth Bomba from the Citizens' Manifesto will add to that. I think the main thing is that we are in a very critical stage of the process, and we from the PCC, Platform Concerned Citizens, were among the first to respond to both the Citizens' Manifesto but also to the Sabbath call by adding a context to it, that the main message from the church was to highlight the dire circumstances in which we find ourselves in the country, and to make it clear, as we all of us have said, that the process of going to elections has become meaningless until we re-establish confidence and trust of the population of this country. That's what it's about. So, without much ado, I'd like to ask Kenneth Tata, ZCC, and our current chair in terms of the process that we're talking about, to outline for us.
Thank you very much. To this discussion is that on the 7th of October, the Zimbabweans of Christian denominations made a very important call to the effect that the nation was in deep pain over the many challenges that were affecting us all, but specifically that the realization that it was no longer conceivable that a single actor could provide sustainable solution to the challenges that we were facing. And then the call that we needed to create an environment of trust and confidence through the suspension or postponement of all party political contestations to allow for meaningful engagement to find a lasting solution. the initial response for many was very negative, mainly because for some this was a challenge on the constitution, and therefore they were concerned that the call appeared to be unconstitutional. And of course, this is the response that we got from the two main political parties. But the churches were convinced that the effort was to move beyond constitutionality to constitutionalism, to raise the value of the spirit of the Constitution beyond simply following its letter. Following that process, we were of course surprised then to see others who read it very closely, showing that actually it was raising some important issues that many have been trying to raise over a long period of time, and therefore it was a process that was supposed to be engaged. What then followed was the establishment of some Sabbath process, which later culminated into what is emerging now as the National Convergence Platform. It is this process that we think seeks to embody both the process we think can ensure broad participation of non-political actors in the dialogue, in the envisaged dialogue process, as well as contributing to the shaping of its content. I think for this serves as giving the context in which we are engaging now, and I think I could end here for now, and then we can then get into detail when Briggs has also given some flesh to the contribution the Citizen Manifesto has been making toward building this common platform.
Thanks. We'll come back to you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Mandas, who have looked at how society moves forward. Society addresses challenges, that arise from time to time. It's becoming clearer and clearer every day that the secret is simply around creating a sustained platform for conversation. Society regresses even all the way to collapse in the absence of a sustained platform for dialogue. So I would want to make sure that we do not underestimate or understate the importance of the platform that has been created here for many years. Where whenever there is a challenge, whenever there is a problem, whenever there is an issue, we can convene the way that we are convening like this, and we are engaging around it. And the conversation always goes beyond the number of people who show up at any one given time or at any particular time. The conversation extends in the many networks and constituencies that we are coming from. And in this day of technology, it goes even further than that. And again, thanks to Reverend Mutata for the remarks that you have given, and I think beyond that, for insistently driving and championing this question of how do we find each other as a nation? How do we find a viable pathway to a conversation that can get us out of the situation that we find ourselves as a country? I think that has to be acknowledged, that has to be recognized. So us, it's a few things. The call by the churches coincided with several processes that we have been championing and driving since 2016 as the Citizens Manifesto platform, which is a platform that we have now come up with words that talk of it as a convergent civic space for those who are interested in coming together to look at the question of what is the future that we want, and how can we strengthen our solidarity, and how can we amplify our voices as citizens in informing the future that we want as a country. Our commitment to this process really derives from the fact that we recognize that we are in a state of a dire national emergency. We have an emergency with regards to our healthcare. Junior doctors have been on strike. Senior doctors have joined the strike. Patients, citizens are desperate when they go to our public hospitals. People are dying in our hospitals. And even when the workforce is present, the facilities that we have are so dilapidated that they still write a death sentence to our citizens. It's the same thing with regards to access to essential medication in our public hospitals. So we do have a dire healthcare emergency. We have an emergency with regards to our education sector. Teachers have been on strike. Some completely on strike. I'm seeing Comrade Roboy here from the Association of Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe, Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe. Some teachers, most schools, teachers are showing up for work only 2 days a week out of the 5 days, and we're expecting that we churn out students who are, prepared and ready. So we have a massive crisis in our education sector. The number of kids who are showing up hungry at schools is unbelievable. Then you go beyond that. We have a significant crisis with regards to the erosion of wages and pensions in this country. Prices have shot up, wages and pensions have remained the same. And even if you bring the most brilliant mathematician, they cannot tell you how people are surviving. When you used to earn this much and everything that you spend money on has gone up by 1,000% and you're still earning the same. So we have a massive crisis on that. We have a massive crisis with regards to jobs. And it continues and continues. So I think for us that is the starting point. We are in a situation of a dire national emergency where we are facing pervasive crisis across all the board. If you look at the crisis of jobs, more than 90% of our young people cannot find jobs. When America talked about the depression, the Great Depression, unemployment was 25%. They declared total economic collapse, and that is a conversation that has been on the table for almost 100 years. 25%. In Europe, the highest that unemployment went during the Great Depression was 33%. Yet we are dealing with unemployment of over 90%. And somehow there's some normalization of that abnormal reality. So we have a dire national crisis. And the second point is that there is proven inability for the government to solve this crisis on their own. It's 2 years now since the Mnangagwa administration came into office. So sometimes people say the jury is out, but I think we can now say the jury is in, and the verdict is very clear. and it says that there is inability to address this crisis, at least when you look at the government dealing with this situation alone. There is clear evidence of resistance to reform from sections of the new administration. There is clear evidence of entrenched corruption that is proving to be so difficult to fight. And these are not even my words, it's even ED himself. He's come out to say, wow, I thought corruption could be fought overnight. But now I'm just discovering that you have to deal with this layer. Corruption in the prosecutor's office, corruption in the magistrate's office, corruption in the High Court, corruption at, we must accept it. We have corruption that is pervasive across all spheres and all sectors of our society, but particularly those who have the responsibility for public administration. So it has become clear, again, that this is so entrenched, and internally it is proving that the government cannot resolve it. So in a certain way, the processes that we are championing and offering here are actually processes that can assist in addressing the internal contradictions that makes it impossible to consistently pursue a path towards reform. Even though you mentioned reform in your transitional stabilization plan and all the other documents, it's an offer to make it possible or to change the balance of forces and make it possible to address corruption that has proved to be impossible to address simply within the Politburo or within the internal dynamics of the government that we have in place. So it is clear that the current government does not have the ability to resolve the dire national emergency that we are facing on their own. And in any case, to be able to move the country forward in the direction that we all aspire to, we are going to need a national citizens' consensus. Even if we're to come to certain points where we say we must tighten our belts, we must sacrifice for this and that, you need the people behind you. You need the people's consensus to be supporting those approaches. And without that, those policies, those approaches are futile. And beyond that, we are going to need international support to get us out of the mess that we find ourselves in. There is no country in the history of Earth that has come out of the crisis of the depth that Zimbabwe finds itself in without significant international support. And for you to get to that, which has proved already that the government on their own, they are not going to be able to mobilize the kind of international support and consensus that we are looking at. And I think the other reason that, the third point, is that we face a real risk of a further deterioration in the conditions that we find ourselves in. And I can go further and call it an uncontrolled deterioration of the situation that we find ourselves in. There is already evidence. Those who've been following even the Herald, today's editorial piece in the Herald is about the machete wars in the Midlands. How artisanal miners, mining for gold are going out there, and how dozens of people are actually dying as a result of these machete wars. People are just moving out, fighting it out, and completely editing out the state now and settling these issues of who gets what, when, and how by themselves. So we are facing a real risk of an uncontrolled deterioration of our situation into a complete and total social collapse. And that must concern us. We can't bury our heads in the sand when we face such a reality. Because the other issue is, look at Somalia. it's very difficult and sometimes even impossible to come back from that level of a total social collapse. It can take you 50 years to come back from that. So we have a responsibility as citizens to step up to the plate and raise our voices, proffer solutions that can help us avoid that kind of a collapse. I mean, look at what's happening. We've seen all these stories from, Epworth. You are already, it's almost like we are past time. So what we are doing here is a very important process, but it's almost like we are too late. Things are already unraveling in that sense. The very social fabric of this society is unraveling. Mkanya saying, and he said, "Nyika yenyu yamaichemera ona yaita mamvemve." That was shown that if you translate into political science language, mamvemve, nyika kana ichita mamvemve means social collapse. It means complete polarization, complete divisions, toxic political divisions. What we are seeing right now, complete toxicity in our politics. It means people losing hopes, people losing the ability to dream of a better future. It means young people hanging on the back of the combis here from CBD to Chitungwiza, and a lot of them falling and dying. It means an increase in crime. It means an increase in violent crime. It means people completely bypassing the state and settling issues on their own. So we need to avoid that situation. So we do have an urgent need for dialogue in this country because our options are either we create a framework for an inclusive national dialogue that pulls everyone back from the precipice and redirect everyone's energy into co-creating a solution, or we go in the direction of social collapse. And I think we want to invest everything that we have in the former when we are faced with those two options. So the frameworks, the present frameworks that we have that had been imagined before to say how do we maintain stability, how do we maintain the social fabric of this country have all proved to be inadequate. Because, of course, historically we have known that when things became difficult, there would be the tripartite negotiating forum that brought together labor, it brought together capital, and it brought together the state to negotiate issues and settle them somehow. But right now, we have the vast majority of the country unaccommodated on that framework. You have pensioners who are not represented by labor, and they are amongst those who are suffering the most. You have the informal economy that is not represented by structured, organized, formal labor unions, and they are amongst those who are suffering the most. You have ordinary citizens who are not accommodated in that equation. Even if you go further and you say Poland, it even stands out as a more unaccommodative platform in terms of this question of an inclusive national dialogue, a framework for an inclusive national dialogue that can allow the most inclusive way of co-creating solutions. So from the Citizens Manifesto perspective, we've held several consultations, including 2 national conventions, including the one that Dr. Mandaza referred to in September. And in May, so in January, we did issue a call for inclusive national dialogue. And I think it's important to quote a few sentences from that call, because we issued this call the day on the 14th of January, which was the day that the shutdown was starting. We were at Media Center. When we got to Media Center, everyone knew that the statement was going to come. There was, you know, those water cannons, gray water cannons parked opposite. And we found the screen closed, and there were like 5 uniformed guys holding the doors. Comrade Gondo was there. It was tough. Some of our members actually left. They couldn't, because you had to go past those 5 guys, open the gates, and then go upstairs. So we issued a call, and it was a call to recognize the state of economic emergence in this country and to move towards an inclusive national dialogue. And some of what was said in that call was that we appear before the nation today and we show our faces. We have nothing to hide. We stand firm in the democratic rights and freedoms provided by our Constitution. Above all, the right to peaceful protest and the freedom of assembly and expression. We appeal to the government to take the citizens' voices, anguish, and pain that we convey today seriously. As Citizens' Manifesto, we would like to categorically make it clear that we derive our mandate from the people of Zimbabwe in their individual and organizational diversity, and we will continue to advance their interests through robust engagement as a local, homegrown people's movement. And we dismiss all insinuations to the contrary. And it closed by saying it is love for country that motivates us to take a stand today. We fear that if the government fails to act with the necessary agency, those who will come after us may be faceless, and at that point, it may be too late for the country. This was in January. And sadly, it's still a pending question. And we went further and offered in May a framework towards an inclusive national dialogue. And I'm just going to rush through it. It mentioned 8 parameters as necessary. The first one was safety and security. So let us create a safe environment where we all feel secure to raise our voices and to speak to our concerns and to speak to our aspirations for the future that we want. The second one was informed participation, and this is important to emphasize. National dialogue, effective power block in the resolution of the national crisis. And civil society and citizens, we need to galvanize the citizens' voice. We need a framework that enables us to build consensus as citizens around all the issues that I've talked about and some of the issues that I've not talked about. And this for us is how the National Convergence Platform comes in. We believe that all the different processes that we have championed independently, individually, and sometimes with limited collaboration can all now be directed and galvanized into a national citizens convergence platform that cannot be ignored as we move forward into finding solutions for our country. And in that regard, it's really for me to reiterate that if we are going to have all hands on the deck, you need all hands on the table to start with. Thank you. Let me leave it there.
Thanks very much.
As well as giving it context. And what it leads is we need to translate this into a structure of cooperation among different actors, which is what Briggs has just referred to as this national convergence platform. We envisage that many organizations which have now been consulted are going to be part of this process, which is envisaged to have a symbolic signing event on the 13th of December, mainly to achieve the following objectives. First, to conceptualize, plan, coordinate, and implement a comprehensive and broad-based national dialogue process. So this is the initial process that I think Briggs has already alluded to. Secondly, this is meant to provide formulating and agreeing on common national agenda. I think the three priorities that Briggs has already mentioned, I think are shared by many of these organizations, and therefore there will be need for consolidating these shared themes. Number three, to mobilize the nation together towards a comprehensive and broad-based national dialogue process. Right now, some people have viewed this call for national dialogue as a political invitation. Others have seen it as a civil society pastime. Others have seen it as an interest of some few church actors. But I think citizens need to recognize that a participation in a broad-based engagement process is a solution and a lasting solution, contributes to a lasting solution to the challenges that they are facing. Fourth, to establish a non-political actors dialogue representation team, so that when the national dialogue process begins, we have a team that takes seriously the interests of the broad citizenry and present these as key expectations in the dialogue process. I think as Briggs has already alluded to, we know that there have been other dialogue processes in the past which culminated in decisions, for example, of the establishment of the New Zimbabwe in 1980, in 1987 and 2009. And because there was no block of non-political actors who could proffer a position taking seriously the interest of non-political actors, these views were never taken into consideration. And therefore, the view that such a platform would allow such representation is one of the key objectives. Last but not least, I think Briggs has also alluded to this, that this becomes a collaborative monitoring of the implementation of the outcomes of the national dialogue process. In other words, it's envisaged that after the national dialogue process, there will be an outcome. And one of the major weaknesses is that when you have an outcome, you assume that you are going to have an implementation. And the understanding here is that the National Convergence Platform seeks then to become a collective space in which monitoring of implementation of the outcomes of such a dialogue process will be taking place. I think one of the issues that, having been given this background and what we are looking forward to, we need to be aware that there is a growing understanding and consensus that national dialogue is going to be, is not something that we can now avoid. It may be delayed. Some people may try to subvert it. Some people may try even to compromise it. Some people may try to underplay it. But at the moment, there is growing consensus that the only way we have to find a lasting solution to the crisis we are facing is going to be through this national dialogue process. And this platform, we think, will play an important process in this regard. As Briggs has already indicated, the international community will look at this as a very interesting proposition, because they will not only have to deal with negotiation of power among the political actors, but also those who are bringing other interests that have nothing to do with acquisition of power. And this brings an important matrix in an effort to find a lasting solution for Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thanks very much. From now, we'll have this ceremony where those of us who are part of the emerging National Convergence Platform will symbolically attach our signatures and then define the way forward. It will be really a coming together of minds, a culmination of processes that have been taking place, and as far as I'm concerned, it will be a historic event, marking as it does the first time that we can say civic society in Zimbabwe, outside the political parties, has come together for the third voice to be heard. So, any comments? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the elaborate.
So thank you for the engagement. I wanted to speak, first to the question of someone asked what parameters do you use to measure the failure or success of a government? And, for me, the response is that if we make a commitment here that we are going to move from Harare to Bulawayo, after an hour, I expect to see signs that say Chegutu. After about 1.5 hours, I expect to see signs that say Kadoma 10. After about 3 hours, I expect to see signs that are saying Guero. So in a sense, what we are speaking to is just a sense amongst citizens that we are not on that trajectory that has been spelled out, given the time that we have gone through. If it was 2017, you're looking at 2 years, or if it's 2018, you're looking at a year. And it calls for a conversation, and in my view, it justifies the calls for a national dialogue that are being raised. Because at the end of the day, the responsibility to fix the challenges and the problems that we have as a country does not necessarily lie just with those who have been privileged to be, in elected office. If things don't work, you broaden the framework around which you are consulting and around which you are creating solutions. And that's why, in many respects, if you look at the UK right now, how many elections have they had over the issue of the Brexit? Because they get to a particular point where they realize, yes, we do have an elected prime minister, but I think let's broaden our conversation, let's bring again the citizen voice, because ultimately the sovereignty lies with the citizenry. So look at Israel, how many elections have they had? So the basic point is to say, currently, and all of us here, I didn't hear anyone dispute it, we all accept that this is not the normal situation that we would love to live with. We need solutions out of where we are. So if we create a platform for dialogue that, hold on, I'm coming to that. If we create a platform that enables all our voices to speak to the solutions that we need. And when I say all our voices, I mean voices by those who are affiliated to the opposition, voices by those who are affiliated to the ruling party, and voices by those who are non-affiliated. We don't do very well with our statistics here. If you look at the US, they'll tell you that 35% of our population are independents. They actually go out and they register that way. They don't vote a Republican Party card or a Democratic Party card. So let's not assume that that reality does not exist in Zimbabwe, where you will have people who are not necessarily this party or that party, but who are independent and who on a particular issue, they'll vote for a councillor because they know that he contributed to a school. They'll vote for an MP because of this, not because of the party card that he's holding. And I wanted to go further and talk about Pollard. We had the NPRC participate in the consultation that we did in March at Cresta, looking at developing a framework for an inclusive national dialogue. And there are certain inputs that we gave there. I think Commissioner Patience Chiradza was in the meeting. One of the issues that we raised was that we were concerned that the president had put together a group of political actors and called it national dialogue. I'm putting this on record because it's the truth. You can go and confirm this with the NPRC. We are the ones who made the input to the NPRC to say we think that this must be called political actors dialogue. Go and check your press. You're going to find out that when this was initially announced, it was called national dialogue. And we were saying national dialogue, there's a framework that we developed, which is available for everyone to see, where we define national dialogue as a multi-level process. Political actors dialogue is a component of national dialogue, but it cannot be substituting for national dialogue. That's the input we made, and we are very happy that that input was taken on board. And midway, we saw the reframing from national dialogue to political actors dialogue. Our expectation is that we'll have business dialogue, we'll have young people's dialogue, we'll have women's dialogue, we'll have rural people's dialogue, peasants dialogue, and they will all ultimately amount to national dialogue. So we don't come into this conversation with any cheap intentions or plans for, some of the things that you might, I don't know, someone was talking about the grapevines. We come into this conversation with a total commitment to wanting to contribute towards a solution. So we value the role that political actors are playing in this equation, but we're simply saying, can we allow other constituencies as well to come into this, and can we add everyone up? Then it becomes a national dialogue. Takes me to the third point, which is the question you raise around the dichotomy that seems to be suggested between political parties and citizens' formation. Because on another level, you are right to say political parties, if we are consistent with representative democracy, they are the vehicle, they are the channel through citizens express their preferences or delegate their voice. So political parties do represent citizens in a very big way. And this is something that we accept. But the reason why we are insisting that the framework that we are calling an inclusive national dialogue framework must go beyond political parties is precisely the fact that we recognize the reality that even if we accept that fact, it still does not create a home, a voice, a channel, a platform for all our citizens. There are still citizens who are left, who are outside. And there are certain peculiarities to our Zimbabwe reality that actually makes it an obligation for us to insist on a framework that goes beyond political parties. We have political parties in this country that believe in deploying a candidate into a community to say, this is the candidate who is going to represent you. We are putting forward a completely different proposition where we are saying communities must not vote for someone on the basis of a promise, they must vote on the basis of a record. So it must be your community that knows your record, that you mentored kids after school, you helped with the repairing of potholes, you helped with safety and security in your community. It's those people who must select you to then become your councillor, then become their member of parliament. So we have a reality where a political party can delegate you from up here, but you don't have a record in the community.
So it's a completely different proposition, and we're saying it must have space in the discussions that we are having.
No.
So it speaks to your
I'm
point.
chairing this meeting, young man. I'm chairing this meeting.
It's okay, young man. It's okay. So it speaks to your point, and it's an intellectual conversation that I'm actually interested in engaging in after. It's a conversation. I mean,
listen, Jack.
It's okay. The Pan-African researcher. I'm speaking. No, it's okay. I'm speaking to the Pan-African.
It doesn't matter.
It's okay. I want to speak to your point on the parameter. Yeah. I've talked about 4 points. If you wanted to go, if you wanted to go, let me speak to your parameter. Let me speak to your parameter, because I gave you an example about moving, and I'll conclude.
You can go through Mashingo.
Of course, even that, I'll still know. Even that, I'll still know. So if you look at some of the issues, that the commitments, the expectations that citizens have had, whether it's with regards to where our inflation is going to be, whether it's with regards to just the standard of life that you'll be enjoying after 6 months, after 1 year. So we don't have to go into statistics or certain specificities. Even if you speak to Minister Nue, he will tell you that he has missed his inflation target. Yeah, I'm giving you a measure. He will tell you that he has missed his inflation target.
If you talk to him.
Of course. He will tell you that he has missed his inflation target. It's not a question that's debated. The second biggest thing that he has missed is the money supply target in this country. The reason why the IMF is saying that they want to cancel or they're recommending suspending the staff monitored program is that the country had committed to contain money growth, and that was not met. So there are certain things you can look at, but it's not necessary to go into those details. Hold on, let me conclude. I'm going to be here for conversations. I'm not going to move away. I'm going to be here for conversations. So I wanted to just conclude on one last point, and this is really just around mandate. Because the way that I look at it, I want to conclude on the point of mandate. The way that I look at it is that every citizen has a right to speak up.
Can you allow him to finish his conversation?
I'd like to just.
Okay, listen, please. Can you allow?
Tell him to go back where he was sitting.
No, it doesn't matter. He's free to sit.
What's the purpose of you coming here?
I don't think there's an issue there.
I can come and sit there.
You can. You're actually welcome to come and sit here. So I wanted to speak to this issue of mandate.
Don't continue as long as he's here.
Every citizen has a right to speak and contribute to how we can move forward as a country. For me, that is where you derive your mandate. You don't even need to be elected first to be able to have that voice. The mere fact that you're a Zimbabwean citizen, you are born in this T-shaped country, gives you that mandate. So the various initiatives that we are seeing are simple citizens taking a step towards the plate and saying, look, this is my small contribution. So you have a mandate, I have a mandate, everyone here has a mandate to form civic formations, to build political parties, to contribute individually, collaboratively, in many respects. So I don't think we should question any citizen voice that rises and say, this is how I think we can move forward as a country. Thank you, Doc.
No. I said no. Democracy.
Thank you.
Please carry on. Ngube. No, we finished question time.
Let's hear.
Please carry on. Please carry on.
I think
No, I'm chairing. Please. They don't have to answer your questions.
So what's the purpose of us asking questions?
Well, least of all, most of all when you are disrupting the answers. Let me just conclude. The reason why we came here was to introduce the emerging National Convergence Platform, based on a very obvious and tangible problems in our country. I'm surprised that you ask for parameters.
Yes, but
Let me tell you. I think you have been forced. Let me tell you. I think you have been forced. You have been forced. You want to altercate with me? We talk later on. Allow me to speak now.
you're making a conclusion based on what
Can I speak now? I'm speaking now.
Why are you making a conclusion? They have to respond to our question.
I am chairing here.
But I am chairing not.
They choose. Listen here. Listen. If you have come here, Ngube, if you have come here to pillory, to target my panelists, that's a bit. I'm chairing.
You are chairing
Ngube.
You are chairing the panelists. The panelists are going to respond to the contributions.
I'd like to thank Tony. Ngube.
Respond to tell you not to speak to me. He's
Ngube.
not the chair, he's not the panelist. What is he? Is he not a guest?
Ngube. This is the second time.
Your problem is you address me, not him. Why not you ask him to take on the Arochi? That's your problem.
You want to assault somebody just now?
No, why? Because I'm provoked. Why does he keep addressing me? Who is he? Is he a panelist? Is he chair? When he's a panelist, I respect him. Is he a panelist extension?
Listen.
The problem
We come here.
You are biased. You don't respond to us. When you complain, we raise complaints, you say no problem. But when it's our time to react,
I am chairing
But
now.
now, instead, this is not addressing
The meeting is over now. If you want to ask questions, the meeting is over.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you.
But then next time, the panelists must respond.
Bye-bye.
The panelists must respond to the questions. They don't just come here and speak out of no. They must respond to the question. You have to give me any one parameter and answer that question. It's no longer being
I hope you've done your work today.
no
Huh?
longer you are chairing, but that people you are silent.
I'm chairing Ngube.
one of the
Yes, I understand. That's why I'm
Can you give the panelists a hearing? Please.
Yeah, I don't know if you have a problem with the panelists, but with yourself, when we raise the complaints,
I'm chairing, unfortunately for you. I'm chairing.
Okay, I think
You will.
this is a policy platform now. This is a policy.
If you are behaving unintellectually, then you don't belong here. You don't belong here if you don't unintellectual.
The issue is we come here because you are intellectual being an academic, so we come here to learn. But when we now behave like
Well, learn. Sorry, please carry on.
yeah, one of the very interesting observations that I'm making is that some people are not aware that the issues that we are proffering were actually raised by President Mnangagwa when he first announced national dialogue. President Mnangagwa mentioned specifically organizations that he thought were going to be part and parcel of the national dialogue process. He mentioned specifically civil society, he mentioned churches. So if you go to his Twitter when he arrived from Belarus, you realize that what we are talking about here is not something new. We are simply realizing something that has already been raised. So I would, for me, this is very interesting that our enthusiasm for our leadership must also be informed by our commitment to their to the trust that inform what they are doing. And I think this is what we must be focusing on here. I think one of the issues that was raised was the question of participation of young people. And I'm glad to realize that there are a number of groups that are taking initiatives to make sure young people will need to participate in informed national dialogue process. Because there are many reasons why I think these efforts must be commended. First, because, of course, because of the demographics. There are many young people in our nation, and therefore their voice must be heard. They must contribute to reimagining the future in which they are going to participate. But there is another reason. We need to develop a new intellectual culture among young people, many of whom have not learned to think for themselves. So it will be very, very important that in this national dialogue process, many young people are liberated to be able to think independently. And that's why I'm encouraged to hear some young people who are doing research and some young people who are organizing young people to focus on certain areas. We have had a history where young people can easily be used to pursue very narrow and parochial projects. And it will be very important that as we pursue this national dialogue, the participation of young people is deeper than simply using them to drive very short-term interest. One of the also important issues that has been raised is the question of how media will play an important role in this process. Because we know that in terms of polarization, media has also been deeply polarized. And therefore, how the media is going to participate in this national dialogue process is going to be important. I think we need to move beyond a media that's simply entrench camps to a media that educate and liberate thinking. And I think this is what we need to promote in our media, and they can therefore play a very important role in this regard. We have seen actually that media can be mobilized towards constructive processes, where the media is not trying to parrot the interest of particular interest groups or political parties, but they are trying to push critical thinking in the public space. Because one of the difficulties we are facing at the moment is that the engagement in the public space has ceased to be intellectually engaging. It tends to follow personalities. So even criticisms in the public space tend to be criticism of persons. And I think what the national dialogue process may also enable us to do is to move the nation from following individuals to start follow ideas. And we believe that it is only through such processes that the nation could be liberated from the idolatry that informs not only our religion, but also our politics.